Welcome on back, everyone. This is the All Aussie Rules Footy Podcast. This is episode 24. This is our round 10 preview for everything football, AFL football for round 10. Don't forget, as always, like, subscribe, leave your thoughts in the comments. Also, check me out on all my social medias. We got Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. So check them all out. And let's jump straight into it. Latest news in the football world. The floating fixture for rounds 16 through 23 has been released as of yesterday. So we finally know when all the matches are, except for the round 24 matches, which will be released a lot later in the season. No more Thursday football after round 15, which is good for some people. Some people don't like Thursday night football. Me personally, I love Thursday night football. Gives me an extra day of football in the week. Means one less clashing game. It's, in my opinion, great for football to have a game on Thursday night. However, the AFL has decided against it for the rest of this year. A little bit surprising in my mind, but hopefully next year they have a look at it again and potentially have Thursday night right through. Maybe have them not during the bye rounds potentially, but the rest of the season would definitely be good. Because at the end of the day, the less games that are on at the same time, the better for the sport, in my opinion. What else is news in the world? I guess injuries are starting to stack up for across the league, but certainly for some teams. And especially the ones that were maybe had the latest start to the pre-season. Brisbane have obviously lost a lot of players. They have 4 people out for the season with knees, which is terrible luck for them. They also have a couple other pretty long-term injuries in, like Ashcroft's still got 6 to 8 weeks out. Starshevich is 3 to 4. So few issues in Brisbane land, especially with injuries, and it doesn't look like they're going to be getting much back over the near future. Obviously, Zach Bailey hopefully will be back in a week or so. Robertson could be back soon, and same with Noah Answorth. But Carlton, another team that is struggling with injuries. Obviously, Doherty was out for the season from game 1. Silvani was out for the season as well. And their whole list is just getting worse and worse. Hopefully, most are like that 2 to 5 week range, so they should be getting a lot back, hopefully round 14-15, and give them a good run into the finals. But quite a few people out on their list. Collingwood's another one that's starting to rack them up. Luckily for them, they don't have any confirmed out for the season. Dan McStay, obviously, still to be called. He's unlikely to be back. But yeah, they've just had a bit of carnage over the last few weeks. They all should be hopefully coming back in the next couple of weeks for them. But we'll see how that goes, and they'll be hoping that they can avoid any more injuries over the coming few weeks. Essendon's doesn't look too bad. They've obviously got Sam Draper out for 6 to 8 and Dursma out for a bit. But overall, their list isn't too long. Fremantle's is a little rough as well, but mainly short term, couple seasons, but not on key players. Geelong, theirs is pretty cruisy. Jeremy Cameron, obviously out for a week with concussion after what happened on Friday night. Patrick Dangerfield's still a couple of weeks away. We'll see how that goes. Tom Hawkins is being managed this week. Gold Coast list, only 4 people on there, but they are all reasonably long term. Will Powell obviously not injured, but suspended till round 15. Rosas Jr. is out for 4, and Lockie Weller is out for 10. GWS, theirs is looking pretty poor too, with quite a few indefinites, as well as Josh Kelly out for 6 weeks is huge for them. Is probably the biggest one, I reckon. Callum Brown's still got a few weeks suspension, so their list is starting to look a little bit under a bit of pressure to prove their depth, I guess. Hawthorn, a couple of people out for the season, and then a lot of tests. Nothing too concerning there. Obviously, James Sicily will be having a test this week to see if he comes back in or not. Next up, Melbourne. Their list is going okay. They've got a Melksham out for 5 to 7, but the rest all should be coming back in the next fortnight or so. So not too bad for them. North Melbourne. They've got a couple out for the season with Achilles, which is not a common injury, but a couple of them, which is unlucky for them. McKercher, he's done his foot, so he's going to be out for a little bit. We don't know how long just yet, so we'll wait and see. They'll be probably announcing how long they expect him out next week. Port Adelaide, Sam Powell-Pepper, obviously he's out for the season with a knee. Other than that, everyone's hopefully going to be back within a couple of weeks. Rose, we'll see if he comes back in this week or if they give him another week. If I was Port Adelaide, I'd be tempted to give him another week off. Richmond is obviously the well-known team to be struggling big time at the moment. Their list just goes on and on and on. And it doesn't really get much better anytime soon. Obviously, Tom Lynch is still 4 to 6 weeks. Maurice Riol is 8 to 10. Tim Torano's 3 to 4. Hopper 2 to 3. Gibcus is the season. So things aren't great in Richmond land, and it doesn't look like getting better anytime soon, because every time one comes back, two go down, it seems, at the moment. St Kilda, they're probably one of the least affected teams. They have a season injury to Van Ees, but he's not someone that's really pushing for selection anyway. Outside of that, Dan Butler's a week, Crouch is a test, Jack Higgins is obviously suspended till round 11, so nothing too serious for them. Sydney, McCartan's out with concussion for this week. He should be back the week after, hopefully. Callum Mills is still out for 5 to 6, which is basically their only concern on the injury list. With a shoulder, I believe, is his issue at the moment. It was calf, now I think it's shoulder, or the other way around, I don't know. He's got plenty of problems apparently. West Coast, McGovern obviously is the biggest one on this list. He, not in terms of injury-wise, length-wise, or Elliot Yeo too, they both will be having a test this week to see if they're back. Other than that, there's some list players, but no one major. Western Bulldogs, their list isn't going too bad at the moment. Obviously, Bailey Smith out for the season. Will he ever play for the Dogs again? We shall soon find out. Cody Waitman, he's still at 5 to 7 weeks, and Tom Liberatore is an indefinite one, which you'd have to suggest is probably unlikely to come back this season, but we shall wait and see on that one. We will now jump into all of the round 10 games. First up, Thursday night, we have Gold Coast Geelong up in Darwin. This will be Geelong's first ever game at TIO Stadium in Darwin, which will be exciting for people up in Darwin to check out. A very strong outfit in Geelong. They've dropped their last two, which is a little bit concerning for them. But the fact that they were 7-0 was slightly over on what I think they are capable of. So getting them back to 7-2 is probably where I see them as a team, based on what we've seen this year. Gold Coast, they win home games. Their 5 wins have been 4 wins on the Gold Coast and last week in Darwin. So they'll be hoping that they can go back to back up there on Thursday night. Massive Thursday night game for them. What do we see happening here? Gold Coast did beat Geelong last year when they played. That was up on the Gold Coast. The year before, Geelong won on the Gold Coast. Obviously, this is, as I said, Geelong's first game at TIO Darwin, so they've never played each other there. Whereas Gold Coast played there last week and dominated against the Kangaroos. Comparing the teams, Gold Coast they're a middle range team in most stats, and that's probably where I see them. Probably good. Well, they're above average in clearances and getting inside 50s. Converting that into scores is not their specialty, so which is kind of understandable with their forward line not having any major stars. That's probably one area that Gold Coast need to work on the most, maybe in the off season, is trying to bring in some real good forwards. That they've got good forwards, but they don't have the dominant forwards that are going to kick you 4 or 5 regularly and really turn a game. Geelong, obviously Cameron out, I believe Hawkins out, so all of a sudden their lineup looking a little different this week. However, up in Darwin, it's probably not a big tall forward game anyway, so it probably suits the smaller Geelong mid-sized forwards that they have, like the Myers and the Stengels. So we'll see how that plays out for them. They don't do well at clearances, and they're not particularly great at inside 50s. So I think that's where Gold Coast have to really put the foot down, is dominate the clearances and the inside 50s like they do most weeks, and just try and hope that they can convert them this week. Geelong's defence is obviously very, very good. They have the 5th best defence, so I think that's probably where the game's going to be won, is whether Gold Coast can convert their opportunities into shots and therefore goals, or if Geelong can stop them and get them on the counter, because that's how Geelong play their best football. If we move on to game number 2, this is the Friday night match, and this is probably game of the round right here. Up on the SCG, we have Sydney hosting Carlton. Sydney 8-1, they're absolutely flying. Last Friday they played over in WA against Fremantle. They were very, very good. Carlton, they're 6-3. They got the win last week just over Melbourne on Thursday night. A little bit concerning for Carlton is that I think they've lost 3 of the last 4 quarters. So they're just not quite running games out, not finishing them off, which is a slight concern for them. And no better challenge than going up against the best team in the competition, which at the moment, I think it's hard to argue isn't Sydney. They pretty much in every stat up there. They've got the best offence and the best defence at the moment, scoring wise. So things are going peachy for them. Carlton, they score really well, but they concede quite a bit, which is their main concern. They have a little bit of trouble stopping opposition scoring. Their clearance game looked good 3 weeks ago. The last couple of weeks has been a little bit down for Carlton, but I would imagine they probably beat Sydney at clearances, but then that Sydney midfield just out in space gets it done. That's typically what they do. They tackle hard, they pressure, they move the ball forward, and they convert them into goals. They go forward a lot, Sydney, and although they don't really have a outstanding tall forward lineup, their midfielders all get forward and kick goals, which is probably what keeps them going. They've got Heaney kicking multiple goals most weeks. They've got Gould and Chad Warner, and so they're cruising. They've got no issues. I can see it being a very close game. Essendon took it to Sydney, in round 2 or 3, up in Sydney. So no reason Carlton can't push them all the way to the end here. I think Sydney are probably the better team, but it could go either way if Carlton show their best football. Saturday afternoon, we have Collingwood versus Adelaide. Collingwood are flying at the moment. Adelaide have certainly improved their season. Collingwood haven't lost since round 2. They've finally moved into the top 8, and most things are looking up for them, except for, as we mentioned before, their injury list is slightly long, especially in the forward line. But at the MCG, you'd expect that they should be able to take care of Adelaide. They played each other twice last year, once at the MCG, once at the Adelaide Oval, and Collingwood won them both by a combined 3 points. So suggests that this will probably be a close game. In 2022, Collingwood also won both games, one of them by 5 points and the other one by 42, which was the MCG one. So Collingwood have won the last 4, 3 of them by less than a kick, which tells you we might have an absolute ripper game on our hands. I think Nick Dacos is probably the key for Adelaide to stop. His stats look incredible lately. Just when he gets the clearance, Collingwood score, pretty much. Not every time, but very, very high percentage of the time. And he's been getting quite a few clearances, so it's a concern for opposition players, definitely. Collingwood are going to rely on their midfielders and trying to dominate this game, because there's a fair chance that their forward line is not going to be their best forward line they put together this season. Obviously, inside 50s, Collingwood are better at that than Adelaide. Clearances is both teams are pretty average, to be completely fair. Whereas the major difference is probably the tackle and pressure count. Collingwood is outstanding at that. Adelaide, not quite. I think based on what we've seen the last maybe 3 or 4 weeks, Collingwood probably win the clearance game, probably win the inside 50 game, and they'll be trying just to convert as much as they can. Adelaide, their key to victory is probably trying to shut down, as I said, Nick Dacos and the Collingwood midfield, and forcing turnovers and trying to get the ball up the other end. Unfortunately, last week they were pretty good out of the centre. They got it forward a lot, but they turned it over an awful lot, which was their downfall. So they'll be trying to cut that back, whereas Collingwood are a very good team at forcing turnovers. So that might be a hard area for Adelaide to really dominate. The Saturday evening game, GWS hosting the Bulldogs up at NG Stadium. Last week, GWS went down to Essendon down in Melbourne. Bulldogs on Saturday night absolutely decimated the Richmond Tigers. Both teams not super consistent at the moment. Bulldogs obviously up and down, well publicised. GWS started the season great. They were 5-0, I think, and now they're 6-3. So they've only gone 1 win in the last month. They've played some good teams in that, but they would still be a little bit concerned about their current form. I think they definitely need to start winning some of these games. 20-point loss to Essendon is not the end of the world, but they certainly need to start getting some wins. Recent form between these two teams. Last year they played each other twice. They got 1 win each. They played at Manuka Oval and Mars Stadium. 2022, Marvel Stadium, Bulldogs won, and then at NG Stadium, Bulldogs also won that one by 20 points. So Bulldogs probably have the wood over them in the last couple seasons, and the last time they played at NG Stadium before 2022 was 2019, when GWS won in the elimination final. Scoring wise, both teams are very similar. Defensively, they're not that dissimilar either. The actual game styles in most facets are probably very similar. As you can see, they're both got a very high handball rated, like high handball game, being 17th, second and third highest handball rate, behind Fremantle. They both tackle very well. Um, Neither are dominant in clearances. Bulldogs are slightly better, just probably because of the Bont, Trelaw, Libber, and now Richards in there. They're very good. And Bulldogs probably do go forward slightly more often, but the overall makeup of both teams I think is very similar in game style wise. So it'll probably be a good match, and one that probably shows us who's the better of the two in all the at this game style, because they're probably the two most similar playing teams I think in the AFL. Just about, and yeah, it'll be a good match to see who is the better of the two. Bulldogs, they need to win two in a row. There's no doubt about that. They've shown some really good signs. Their win against St Kilda was great. Obviously, they dominated Richmond last week, but then they've had some terrible performances, like their loss to Hawthorn and a couple of their other losses this year. So when they win, they look incredibly good. When they lose, they look really bad. So they need to start bringing their best a little bit more often. Saturday night football, we have St Kilda hosting Freo at Marvel Stadium. The last 2 years they've played at Marvel Stadium both times. St Kilda won the first one, last year, and in 2022 Freo won that one by 41 points. Looking back, previous times they've played at Marvel Stadium, St Kilda won, and St Kilda won. So who's the better team? Well, who knows? So they've played 4 times at Marvel Stadium since 2016. 3 of them have been won by St Kilda, and the only one that was won by Freo was in 2022, so only a couple of years ago. It'll be a very similar, like a lot of players will have been playing then, so probably not too dissimilar game styles. St Kilda have changed a little bit with changing coach. Looking at the two teams, both kind of not in the best form. St Kilda 1 and 4 over the last 5 weeks. Freo 2 and 3. I think you can just kind of forget Freo's last game, and unfortunately, it's going to be tough for them to come over and win this week. They've obviously had a very emotional week, and it would not surprise or be held against them if they weren't at their best again this week. St Kilda, low-scoring, boring games, but that's Ross Lyon football. Fremantle, very similar. I'd be very surprised to see either team kick more than 10 goals in this game. I would expect it's probably going to be about 65 to 61. And probably not the best viewing of all time. But I could be wrong. Both teams just play not lackluster, but slow football that just stay in the game. The last time St Kilda looked good offensively was round 2 against Collingwood. Since then, they've kind of changed. They probably haven't changed their game style, but it's looked like it's changed since then. Freo at Marvel is a concern. St Kilda at Marvel not a concern. So based on that, I can see St Kilda winning this one. However, if Freo bring their best, Sarong at his best, Fife at his best, Freo can win. They absolutely can win this. I think St Kilda are slight favourites at the moment, but I would not be confident in tipping either of these teams, to be honest. The other Saturday night game, Brisbane hosting Richmond up at the Gabba. Another game that's not overly exciting. Richmond obviously coming off a 91-point loss to the Doggies. Brisbane coming off their draw against the Crows on Sunday. And you'd have to imagine that these two teams are just in different leagues. I know Brisbane have kind of struggled this year. They're only 3 wins from 9 matches, but at home against a depleted Richmond that just doesn't look like they're playing AFL at the moment. It's hard to see Brisbane losing this. They have played their last couple games at the Gabba last year. Brisbane absolutely smoked them by 80 points. 2022 they played there in an elimination final, which Brisbane won by 2 points. Before that, 2021 Brisbane won. So 2020 Brisbane won. 2019 Richmond won. So you got to go a fair way back for the last time Richmond won at the Gabba, and it's very, very difficult to see that changing this year. Obviously, if you look at along the lines of Richmond, lowest scoring team in the AFL, conceding the second most, only behind North Melbourne. Accuracy's horrible. Forward efficiency's second worst. Inside 50 differential, they're the second worst. Disposal efficiency, they are the worst. Clearance differential, they're the worst. Tackle differential, they're 12. So, not a good sign. I think you're going to see the ball going forward a lot for Brisbane, which is even bigger concern because I think Brisbane even probably win the clearance battle, which is not something they really do. They more so turn it over in that middle section of the ground a lot and then springboard it forward and don't convert. Whereas if they're winning the clearance game, you can put this in for 100 point plus, because if they're winning clearances, they're not going to be stopped. I can tell you that right now, because they just won't be. So that's kind of not the most exciting Saturday night games, to be honest. Both games are probably not going to be the most exciting, but I could be wrong. Both might be brilliant games. Sunday football. The Dons are flying. They come up against North Melbourne here at Marvel Stadium. And what can we say about this game other than if Essendon lose this, the world will end? Not exactly, but my goodness. North Melbourne, their season has not got started yet. They've barely won a game in the last 12 months. And it's hard to see where that win is coming at the moment. Maybe when they get Richmond, maybe West Coast, maybe. But at the moment, it's very hard to see where it's going to come from. These two teams played each other last year twice. Essendon won the round 22 match by 9 points, and they won the round 12 match by 6 points. So North Melbourne did get close to them twice last year. The year before, Essendon won. The year before that, Essendon won. You got to go back a long time for the last time North Melbourne beat Essendon. I think it's like near on 10 years, give or take. But North Melbourne did get close twice last year, but I feel like the Bombers are probably a better team than they were last year. And North Melbourne are almost certainly a worse team than they were last year. The only thing that makes North Melbourne stats semi-okay is the fact that they kick straight, but that's about all they've got going for them. They concede 23 more points a game than any other team in the competition, which is quite disgraceful. And they do not score, so it's going to be a painful watch, I reckon. I would not be surprised if Essendon turn up with what they've been putting out the last couple of weeks, for Essendon to kick 26, 27 goals in this one. I just can see it happening. They, the way they played last week, Essendon, they beat this North Melbourne team by a long way. So it could be a rough watch on Sunday afternoon. Next game up, Port Adelaide Hawthorn. What do we make of this game? Port Adelaide obviously got a very good win last week after falling apart a little bit in the second half, but held on. Hawthorn, they've won 2 in a row. They've won 3 of the last 4. And all of a sudden you got to say, well, maybe they're not as terrible as we thought they were. To be honest, I still think they're pretty average. St Kilda last week was a good win for them, but St Kilda aren't much in my opinion either. The Bulldogs won. Maybe that was a good win, but I still think Bulldogs just didn't show up that day. And obviously North Melbourne doesn't really count as a win for anyone, does it? Port Adelaide, another team that's probably very inconsistent. Their scoring and defence is middle range for the top 8 teams, but then their forward efficiency is very good. I've put in the wrong number there, but they are ranked first. They're definitely above 40.98. Inside 50 differentials really good. Disposal efficiency is good. The clearance differential is really good, and their tackling is very good. Outside of the Collingwood game where they got kind of shown a lesson in that, they are very, very good. Adelaide Oval swings at Port Adelaide's favour as well. The last 2 times these 2 teams met has been at Adelaide Oval. Port Adelaide won last year by 55 points. The year before, Hawthorn absolutely smoked them, but this is a much better Port Adelaide team, and Hawthorn I don't think it's improved since 2022. What will we see? It's probably a decent game. You'd imagine we can see Port Adelaide winning this on about 100, 110. Hawthorn will probably score somewhere in the 75 to 80 range. 5-goal margin would be about what I expect. Will it be what we see? Who knows? But that's what I would expect going in. Port Adelaide can be a little bit inconsistent, but they also are a bit of a flat track bully sometimes, even though they kind of got rid of that name last week when they beat Geelong. But when they do get up against a team that's a little bit lower ranked, they do tend to win by big margins. So we could see that happen on Sunday afternoon. One final game for the round over in the West Coast hosting Melbourne. What do we expect from this game is probably a Melbourne win. Melbourne have to win this, in my opinion. They're a much better team. They're a lot more advanced than West Coast, obviously. They did lose to Carlton last week with Melbourne, but I don't think that's too much of a concern. West Coast got beaten quite convincingly by Collingwood, and yeah, that's basically the long and the short of it. These 2 teams only meet once a year, pretty much every year, and they have play in WA pretty much every year. So much so that they have not met in Victoria since at least 2016. My numbers in front of me don't go back any further than that, but yeah, their last nine of their last 10 games have been at Optus, and one at TIO Trago Park. So Melbourne have plenty of experience going over to Optus. The last 4 times they've played have been 3 wins to Melbourne, the last 3 in fact, and then the one before that was West Coast one in 2020. But that West Coast team in 2020 was pretty solid. I can't remember if they made finals, but that was before they really got bad. It might have been, I will say it was round 1 in 2020, so that was pre-COVID. And before, I think injuries and COVID hit them in 2020 from memory, which ruined their season. So that was before that happened. It's hard to see Melbourne not winning this. Last year they beat them by 63, the year before 80, the year before 9 points. So 3 in a row over there. You'd imagine we'll see them win their 4th in a row against the Eagles here. They're the better team. They're in better form. Eagles haven't been terrible, but certainly the last 5 or 6 weeks have certainly been a big improvement on their first few. But they've still got a little ways to go, I think, before they start beating teams like Melbourne. If this was a middle range team, someone like a Bulldogs or a St Kilda, yeah, sure. Say Eagles have a very solid chance. But being in one of the top teams in Melbourne, I can't see that happening for them. Final thing we'll look at today is just my tips for this round. For the 9 matches, we'll run through them. First up, Gold Coast Geelong. I think Geelong are just the better team, and even though it's their first game up there in Darwin, I just think they'll be too strong. I also think that Geelong's game style is not terrible for a Darwin match that tends to be very slippery and fast-paced and kind of wet weather football. I think Geelong will be fine in that. So I'm tipping them by 17. Sydney Carlton. You can't go against Sydney at the moment. I can see Carlton winning. I 100% can see Carlton winning. But you just can't go against Sydney. They've been too strong. You just ignore their one loss against Richmond, and their whole season have just been too strong for everyone. Collingwood Adelaide. Collingwood seem to be back. It's at the MCG. Adelaide are improving, but I think Collingwood win this. GWS Bulldogs. The Bulldogs we saw last week will be right in this. The GWS we saw last week is a little concerning, but they finally get back to NG Stadium for the first time in 6 weeks. I think they'll be fired up. So I'm just going GWS at the moment, but I could change my tip before the game starts, because the Bulldogs, at their best, can definitely win this. St Kilda Freo. I've gone St Kilda. I don't like St Kilda. I think they're showing that about their true form. I don't see them being even in top 10. I don't see them in top 12 teams. I definitely see Fremantle was a better team. I just think at Marvel, Saturday Night Football, Freo have had a very, very tough 7 to 10 days. I just think St Kilda will sneak over the line. But Fremantle are the better team, so if they do show up, Fremantle win this. The other game, Brisbane-Richmond. I've gone Brisbane by 100. To be honest, could be 150 if the Richmond from last week shows up and the best of Brisbane shows up. It's going to be an absolute decimation. It's not going to be the most entertaining game. It's very hard to see a world where Richmond compete in this one. Sort of similar for Essendon and North Melbourne. Essendon are flying. They have very little concerns at the moment. Their midfield is playing well. Their forward line is getting it done. Their back line is getting it done. Ben Mackay's been great down there for them. North Melbourne just haven't shown a thing yet. Yes, they have some very good young players that are exciting to watch, and hopefully they will be able to keep them and develop them into good players and a good team, but they're showing nothing at the moment. Port Adelaide hosting Hawthorn. It's hard to see Port Adelaide losing this. They're just the better team. And the final game, Melbourne should be able to go over to the West and beat West Coast. But once again, I see it being a reasonably close game. I don't think Melbourne's a team that really blows teams out too often, and West Coast are certainly showing a little bit more over the last couple of months. So that is the end of another episode of All Aussie Rules podcast. This is episode number 24. Somehow we're already into round 10. Thanks everyone for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment. Let me know how your team's going, not how my team's going. I know how my team's going. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts are. And yeah, don't forget to also follow me on my social medias. I post Team of the Week every week. I post Power Rankings every week. I'm trying to add some more things. I do rating systems, so I'll be posting teams, positions, best players, and stuff like that throughout weeks. Maybe next week I'll be posting the best midfields in the league, maybe, but we'll see. Anyway, thanks again for tuning in. We'll be back on Monday with a wrap up of round 10. But for now, thanks. Catch us next time.